Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be able to host this session for you today. I'm Yvonne. I am a platforms account executive on our Google marketing platforms team. And I work primarily with our media and entertainment customers. And my fun fact, just to kick us off today, is that I got the chance to visit the Galapagos Islands over the holidays, which was a very, very welcomed break after having really not traveled anywhere for a couple of years. I'm going to pass it on to Erica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Bogdan. I'm a customer success manager on Google Marketing Platform. DV360 holds a very special place in my heart, so excited to be sharing some optimization and planning tricks with you today. And my fun fact is that I used to babysit next to Taylor Swift's home in Rhode Island. If you're familiar with the song Last Great American Dynasty, that is the house that she wrote about. And that's my crowning achievement of life. Yeah. Yvonne, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. All right. So just to set the table here, we wanted to start by sharing what we think you'll be able to take away from this session by the end of the hour. So 3 learning objectives. Number 1, you'll be able to understand how to leverage the various tools within DV360 to both plan and optimize your programmatic campaigns. Number 2, we want you to not just know the tools are available, but be able to navigate and use that information derived from the tools to generate actionable recommendations for your team or for your clients. And then last but not least, we are also going to, at the end, cover automated bidding, in addition to explaining a little bit of what that secret sauce is to leverage the power of DV360's algorithms. As Stephen mentioned, we'll be breaking up the presentation a bit with live demos, trivia, and of course, keep those questions coming throughout. Here's a bit of an agenda, so you'll see what the flow is for the next hour. We'll start with planning and forecasting, and then get really deep into the planning module, sort of one by one, so you can see how the bricks are laid down. We'll then turn to talk about optimization. So once you're in flight, what are some sort of rules of thumb to keep in mind, and how to turn various levers to get to where you need to go. And then at the end, we'll touch on some troubleshooting. So first, we are going to dive into the different tools available within DV360 to help you plan and forecast your programmatic campaigns. We're going to start at the very beginning, that briefing stage. So when you receive a brief from your teams or from your clients, it's really important to look for where it states the marketing objective. What will the campaign ultimately be held up against? How will it be measured? And then for you, it's important to then understand how those marketing objectives translate into a media KPI, key performance indicator, or an optimizable KPI. What we've done here is sort of delineated between what you might see on a brief, those marketing objectives, and how those marketing objectives can be translated on the right. So for example, are you looking to raise awareness, upper end of the funnel, influence consideration, or drive action, lower end of the funnel, right? If so, there are corresponding KPIs that are paired to each of those marketing objectives. And why do we go through this process? Well, KPIs are really important because they are the sort of tangible metrics with which your programmatic campaigns in DV360 can be directly optimized against. Now, let's say we're starting with a completely blank slate. You're actually being asked by the client to consult on what the business metrics, those marketing objectives, and those KPIs ought to be. I mentioned sort of upper and lower end of the funnel. So we'll sort of continue with that analogy because that is a nice way to think about, those broadest or top parts of the funnel being delivery or awareness, just raising awareness, getting more people aware and familiar with your brand. And then you've got various engagement metrics as you work down. So let's say you're in a product launch, or you see branding within that marketing brief. Typically, you're then looking for big reaches of audiences or delivery, right? And then the associated KPIs may be CPM, reach efficiency, and ultimate kind of volumetric reach. In the middle of the funnel, engagement and consideration initiatives. This may be a campaign where your objective is to get somebody more familiar with your products and your brand. And typically, video plays a really large part in driving engagement. And that's where you can look at your tool set of video engagement metrics, such as CPCV, that's cost per completed view, VCR, video completion rate, AVOC, which stands for audible and viewable on complete, and CIVA, which stands for completed in view and audible. So really getting to those high quality video views there. Remarketing loyalty is another sort of part of that mid funnel. And this is where you may be more concerned with the actual target audience that you're going after, and some associated metrics, maybe on target percentage, specific audience reach, and so on. And then last but not least, let's say your marketing objective, the brief that you've been given, is all about driving sales, driving purchase. There's a very clear action at the end that you want users to take: signing up for something, installing an app. Those are termed conversions in the world of KPIs. And those metrics may be CPA, cost per acquisition, ROAS, return on ad spend, CPI, cost per install, and so on. So as you can see, this is just a little bit of a cheat sheet for when you are analyzing your brief, figuring out what your objectives are, and then determining what the appropriate measurable KPI may be for you. Now that you understand what the goal of the campaign is, you then need to understand your audience, so that we can use DV360's tools to help you find that audience. And within DV360, there are actually a couple of resources that can help you at this early stage. There's two reports that I want to point out right now. The first is what's called an audience performance report. And there's a couple of ways to use this. One is you can look back in history, back at past campaigns that may be run within DV360, and check out audiences that were targeted and how they performed against your desired KPI. The second is you may just look at all the different types of audiences that you reach, whether or not you actively targeted them. So look at sort of an exposure report, right? And this will give you a sense of maybe new audiences that weren't line itemed out, but seem to fit in terms of your KPIs, and they may be fodder for you in your next campaign, audiences that you can newly target and scale up on. A second type of report is called the audience profile analysis. Again, this is available inside DV360, and this is really powerful if you don't have a lot of historical campaign data as described in the first scenario. With the audience profile analysis, you start with a seed list. For example, a first-party audience list that you might have gotten from your client. And with that seed list, it will output for you all of the different affinity audiences that index really highly against this list that you've sort of put into the system. And again, this gives you ideas for audiences that you may want to target and test against. So we've gone through objective, we've gone through audience, and in this early planning stage, you may also have some questions about inventory or where your campaigns will run. You always have the choice from a programmatic perspective to run on the open exchange and allow your audience and the other campaign parameters to help you find your target wherever they're browsing. But there's also a lot of inventory available in private exchanges. Marketplace is the inventory tool in DV360 that allows you to find and discover publishers based on inventory characteristics that you care about. For example, it could be audience composition. You really want to be sort of within an environment where you know there are certain sets of users. It could be based on content vertical. It could be based on more of a qualitative metric. So environments that have very high viewable rates and so on. Marketplace in DV360 will even allow you to forecast publisher inventory against, let's say, a specific first-party data audience list. It will also, of course, surface publishers that align really well with your criteria. What's fun about this tool is after you set your parameters and you see the output, the data is downloadable. So you can share it externally with your planning team or with your clients, get some feedback that way. You can also request proposals directly from the publishers within the platform, allowing for a little bit of a back and forth on the criteria that you might want for a deal, and then ultimately helping you set up that deal within DV360 for activation. So in summary, Marketplace is DV360's sort of storefront for publisher deal IDs, and you can customize your view based on your criteria to surface relevant publishers that you may want to include in your campaign. Finally, you may also be asked about format or creative. So what types of creative may be a fit for the campaign that you're about to launch? In this instance, it may actually be easiest to first determine what assets are available to you. This may depend a lot on what is being created from a creative agency or from a client team. So make sure you have a good sense on what formats are available to you if you don't have the option to inform actual creative development. You may be asked on recommendations in terms of creative format. And in this scenario, you can also look at past performance, just like we did with the audience report, and use historical data to drive those recommendations based on what formats may have performed best in the past. And then outside of that, number two, don't forget to take in a broader view. Creative marketplace is very dynamic. So make sure that you're also looking at trends in the industry. This could be in the trades or industry podcasts. Check out what is grabbing attention and what is driving results that can add some color to your recommendations. Finally, a major part of planning is forecasting. So we've gone through those different modules around objectives, audience, all the way through to creative. But let's say you're being asked, all right, well, what does this look, how much budget should I be planning for? What does this look like in terms of scale? DV360 has an inventory availability report to help you with just that, IAR for short. And the inventory availability report helps predict how many impressions or uniques match your specific targeting criteria. And then that can be used to forecast the total scale of your future campaign. And of course, you can select a date range based on, let's say, 30 days of historical data to help you make the most accurate projection. Or maybe you know it's a seasonal campaign and you'll want to sort of select the most relevant historical date range to help you forecast for your future. This visual that you're seeing on the screen is an actual example of what that report builder would look like in the DV360 UI. As you can see, it will allow you to select certain audiences, format types, date range, so all of the sort of criteria that we talked about in the previous slides. And then it will give you a sense of the inventory and impression availability, audience reach. Very, very helpful outputs as you're in that planning mode. And then I'm going to turn things over to Erica.
Amazing. Thanks, Yvonne. I'm going to be stepping in to discuss Plan in DV360 and the different tools available within the DSP to think about how you're planning for your programmatic campaigns. So there's been a lot of work done to bring more planning features into the DSP. As DV360 was getting off the ground and as it was evolving over the past few years, the tools in the DSP were primarily focused on execution. So, things like grouping IOs under campaign object, so you have a more organized view of all of your insertion orders, setting frequency caps at the campaign level, the ability to export campaign summary, and monitor performance across campaigns. These are a lot of feature updates that were prioritized before the planning workspace was rolled out. But the planning workspace is something that is newer to DV360 with the specific focus of giving media planners a chance to really work within DV360 in a meaningful way as well. So the planning workspace, if we move on to the next slide, is under the campaign module of DV360. And like I said, this is something that was built out specifically for media planners. It's something that campaign managers or someone who's a little bit more hands-on keyboard making optimizations in the DSP can certainly leverage as well. But this whole product was designed in mind for media planners to be able to go in and get a sense of what types of reach would be available for the campaigns that you're planning for. So again, this is created with media planners in mind. There's a whole user role in DV360 that kind of only grants access to this specific tool if there are teams that you work with that maybe don't need to have access to the full suite of tools within DV360, but still want to be participating in this planning feature. And the product was designed with 3 key elements in mind. We wanted it to be extremely comprehensive. There's been a lot of research around programmatic guaranteed that shows the value of media consolidation. And this tool was built to truly enable buying across the full suite of inventory and transaction types. So this isn't just limited to availability on, say, open auction display campaigns. You're really enabled to take a look at all different media types that you would want to involve in a campaign and how those different formats would interact with each other, what types of reach would be available, so on and so forth. We also really wanted this to be a streamlined experience and to reduce the time it takes to plan a campaign. I know from my experience working as a media coordinator in the past that the planning process can often involve multiple different spreadsheets and different types of tools and forecasting. And the goal here was to kind of reduce some of that back and forth and give media planners access to the exact same technology that their campaign manager counterparts have to very easily go from the planning stage to campaign activation. And the last piece is that this is separate from execution. So we're aware that planning happens upstream of the actual campaign execution and activation. So the planning tool gives media planners a space to combine different types of inventory types, forecast outcomes, and finalize plans without impacting living campaigns. So it's a pretty safe place to experiment and get a feel for how certain types of inventory would appear once it was live. The planning workspace lives under the campaign module in DV360. So we'll get into a demo shortly to give you a better sense of where this lives. But the reasoning behind this living in the plan workspace is that once a campaign plan has been created and decided that those are the kind of targeting tactics that you want to move forward with, you can actually translate this to an active campaign or kind of translate what you've put into the planning tool into a campaign that you can then tweak targeting of and set live. So kind of going back to that idea of streamlining the process from campaign planning to execution, you can actually take the plans that you create and turn them into live campaigns if that's the process you decide makes sense for you. This is just an overview of what the planning space looks like. It is under that inventory section once you're in a campaign in DV360. We'll jump into a demo in a little bit and give a better sense of how this looks in real time. But it's a really fun place to play around, and I encourage everyone to check this out and see what different types of formats you're thinking about for different campaigns and what types of avails you're seeing. But again, we'll get into that in a live demo shortly. Before we get into the demo, though, we're going to talk about some key features and capabilities. So the Plan in DV360 workspace brings a number of new and existing workflows into that single unified space. So users familiar with DV360 will recognize some of the inventory workflows that have been brought into the planning tool, but at a very high level, it gives you the ability to discover new inventory and publishers and get a sense for how that inventory will look alongside other media that you know you want to run. So it's kind of an extension of the inventory tool that Yvonne was just mentioning. The ability to forecast video and display reach with reach planning is also a really helpful feature here. So if you know that you're going to have different media types running within the same campaign, with the planning tool, you'll get a sense before you even set anything live, what types of inventory will be available, what types of different targeting tweaks you can make to expand reach, so on and so forth, so that you're really setting yourselves up from the start to be extremely successful with what you go live with. And the last piece is the ability to assemble comprehensive campaign plans. And like I mentioned, if you decide that the plan that you put together in this planning workspace is exactly what you want to translate to a live campaign, it's a very easy workflow to translate that in real time. And reach planning is really the bedrock of this tool. So the ability to forecast avails, forecast impressions, and get a sense for budget allocation decisions based on the types of media formats, targeting you want to apply, so on and so forth. So this is a really powerful tool that gives you the ability to be creative, work with your campaign planning teams, work with your investment teams to figure out, okay, we've got a certain campaign budget. If we increase that budget, what will availability look like? If we decrease, what will our reach look like? And recently released features to this tool include the ability to forecast connected TV, YouTube audio, and also to deduplicate reach across YouTube and open auction campaigns. This was a heavily requested feature, so we're really excited that this has officially been rolled out. And another great part of the planning tool is that you're able to get a sense for how deals that are already in DV360 can impact the reach of your broader campaign as well. So this is not just limited to things that are happening in that live auction environment. You're able to get a sense for PMPs, programmatic guaranteed deals, things that exist in that inventory workspace in DV360, which is really exciting. So again, this is truly a comprehensive planning space. If you know that you want to work with a certain publisher, but that deal does not exist in DV360 yet, you can have them port over something to the DSP so that you can include it in your plan as well. So very flexible, and the point is to capture all different factors that you would want to consider within that planning stage. Great, and now we're going to move into kind of what's next for DV360. As I've mentioned, some of the recent launches, which we'll talk about on the next slide if we just want to move over to it, include the ability to forecast display reach. Previously, this had a very video focus when the tool first launched. Now we kind of have the full package. We have display, we've got YouTube audio, connected TV, all of the things. And deduplicated reach forecasting, as I mentioned, this is also a recent launch that was widely requested. We are able to look at on-target reach metrics as well. So thinking about things like forecasting demographic reach and how many people within a certain age group, for example, you might be able to effectively target. And then also the planner user role, I mentioned this briefly, but this is something that if you want to grant access to your media planning counterparts, or if you yourself are a media planner and you don't already have access to DV360, but you don't need access to maybe the more hands-on keyboard or like lever pulling opportunities, you can just get access to this planning tool for your specific accounts to make sure you feel comfortable and safe working the DSP, but knowing that whatever you touch isn't actually going to be impacting anything that's live. Some of the upcoming reach planning tools. This product feature is constantly being updated by our product teams. So as you explore this tool, don't be afraid to vocalize feedback to your account managers. The things that are on the horizon right now, or things that are on the roadmap for Reach Planner, include additional support for deals forecasting, ability to weave in past campaign history to inform plans, which is really exciting, leveraging TV data, and just other expanded coverage areas. So don't be shy in passing feedback along to your account managers as you explore this tool, but hopefully what's been built out so far gives you a pretty good foundation to start effectively planning. Great, and now we're going to navigate to the planning workspace and get a feel for what it actually looks like in real time. So this is my demo account, so it doesn't have any live advertiser data in it, but I'll give you a sense of how to navigate to the tool and what types of things can be pulled in once you're in there. So I'm going to go into my test campaign, drop the inventory tab down, and go to plan. As we showed on the screenshot earlier, this is what it looks like when you first log in here. So the last time I had updated this was actually a few years ago. So the first thing we're gonna do is update these dates to reflect the dates that we're trying to launch our campaign with. Currently, you're able to forecast in 30-day increments. So I'm gonna do March 1st, 2022 to let's do March 30th. And I'll save that. And then in this plan setting, you have the ability to put in factors like inventory. You can set demographic, brand safety, viewability settings here as well, or you can edit that as you build your plan. You can start your plan by starting with YouTube, open auction, or publishers and deals. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to open up open auction, and I'm going to start by adding in open auction display. And I'll say we have a fictional budget of $50,000. So we'll apply that. We're going to show, for this test, we're going to look at a younger audience, say 18 to 34. We'll keep both genders included. And as you start to toggle these different factors, the reach numbers will populate in real time. So you'll get a sense of what your on-target reach will look like. You'll get a sense of average frequency for this group, what the CPM might look like. At this point, we have very basic targeting settings included here, so this is a very efficient campaign. But as you start to play around more, you can add things like audiences, you can add different types of formats you want. I'll throw in another video line here just to show how things update as you add more formats. But you're able to be really flexible and really customize what you want your plan to look like. And I think this is extremely helpful when you're in that stage of trying to decide what you actually want to be launching in DV360, when you're getting ready to finalize campaign details, when you're getting ready to finalize targeting. This is a great place to get a sense of what is actually feasible in the DSP. So lots of stuff to explore here. It's a really fun tool to play around with. On this section here, we've got the reach curve, which gives you an overview of, based on your budget, what are you how likely are you to reach your target audience? The demographics kind of gives you a breakdown of, within this forecasting tool, what's the breakout by age? So we're showing that we index a little bit higher on that 25 to 34 age group here. As you tweak targeting, all of these things will adjust in real time. And you even get a breakout of things like, what is the device type readout that's available within this tool. So again, highly encourage you to play around here. You can be granular with things even like the geo region that you're looking to target. So play around, work with your account managers to get a better understanding of how to use this specifically for your piece of business. And again, yeah, let your account managers know if there's any feedback you have as you explore this tool. Awesome. So that wraps up this demo portion. I'm going to just discard my changes here. And I will pass it back to Yvonne for optimization philosophy.
Awesome. We're going to actually use this opportunity to answer a question that we just got in the live chat. And that question, I believe, is can we run on Open Exchange and use an allow list or sort of a green list feature? Hopefully, I've interpreted that question correctly. And the answer is yes, that is something that can be set up. And that will sort of be the way that you can filter for the environments that you want your campaign to run in, but then sort of have open criteria beyond that sort of whitelist. Hopefully that's the right interpretation of your question. But if you've got more questions around this, make sure to reach out to your account manager, and he or she can give you more specific examples of how to go about setting up those inventory filters. So now we are at the stage where we're going to talk about optimization. Erica and I talked a lot about the planning and activation phases of a campaign. So you've gone through all of your launch criteria, you've played around in the tool until you've gotten to the setup that you're happy with, and the campaign is now live. There are some sort of pillars to consider when you're in flight and you're thinking about optimization. The first and foremost is always go back to remembering what your goal was. What was that North Star for your campaign? Because when you are ready to make those optimization recommendations or changes, you always want to sort of tie it back to what that primary KPI was. And we went through a lot of KPIs at the beginning. So whether it was a cost per acquisition or unique reach of an audience, make sure that when you're looking to improve your campaigns, that it's ultimately going to improve your chances of hitting your KPI goals. Second is make sure you're understanding what the basic equations are behind the numbers. That's what sort of trust the math means. So, for example, if you're determining a pacing of a campaign, right? Know and align with your other team members on what that equation is to get to your pacing number. For example, we've agreed that it is our total budget for that flight divided by the number of days in that flight. That's the math. That's the formula we're all going to use against that metric. And that's going to be really important for every calculation, for every sort of KPI goal that is important to your campaign. Third, reports are your friends. Use reporting often to drive your decisions. Pull it regularly. And we're actually going to talk about in a few slides what a sample cadence may be for you to drive different types of optimization recommendations throughout a campaign's flight. And then last but not least is when you're testing and when you're iterating, so repeating tests throughout your campaign's flight to get to your ultimate objective, make sure that you're tracking down your changes. Document what was recommended, what actually changed. And then when hopefully the needle moves on your KPIs, you can go back and attribute those improvements to the specific recommendations that you made, and that will allow for really clean, clear optimizations as you move and progress. So as promised, we want to talk a little bit about cadence of optimization, being very organized about what types of reports you pull, when, and what optimization recommendations that may drive will help greatly. So for example, on a daily basis, you may be looking at pacing and delivery. So just keeping your eye monitoring and making sure that you're flighting and the way that it's spending budget is at a pace that makes sense. On a weekly basis, when you've got more data, you can look at deeper performance metrics like CPA, for example. And that is something that you can even do at a line item or an audience tier level because you've got more data, and you can make those more sort of granular cuts of reporting to drive more nuanced optimization recommendations. For campaigns that are longer, that go across multiple months, on a monthly basis, you can look at more sort of macro optimization changes, more wholesale changes, like performance by category, content vertical, et cetera, right? Those are going to be some bigger changes, and you're going to want to have hit minimum thresholds of data to help you make those recommendations. Work with your team and divide and conquer and determine who's going to look after daily, who's going to look after weekly, and maybe a team who's going to look after monthly optimizations. Find it really helpful, for example, to even block some time off on your calendar on a Monday morning and just have that block of time dedicated to daily or weekly reporting. All right, so now we're going to talk about the actual levers that you can pull on. And for most of you, this will be a review, but hopefully there's one or two things here that you can take away from and go and sort of play in your sandbox in your DV360 UI later on. So as we begin, what we're going to walk through are actually 3 scenarios so that we are sort of in the mindset of an in-flight optimization right now, and you can sort of see how different scenarios may drive you to make different types of optimization recommendations. The first circumstance here is when you are pacing just perfectly. Your budgets, your impressions, they're going the way that you've calculated, right? Your daily pacing rate to be. That's great. But even with an on-pace campaign, it could branch off into 2 different directions, right? The first is the best scenario. Your campaign is on pace and it's hitting your KPI goals. That's fantastic. In this case, you can just make small tweaks, keep your eye on the daily monitorizations, right? But also maybe there's obvious outliers, like very low performing sites, 1 or 2, that you can exclude from your campaign. The second scenario is where you're on pace, but you're not hitting your KPI goal. And here we definitely need to make some more significant optimizations, right? So you're going to want to exclude those low performing audiences, or maybe even add in some high performing audiences, scale up on those to make sure that you're getting closer to the KPIs that you want to hit. Okay, so we talked about when your campaign is pacing and the 2 different types of ways that you could go from there. But what about if your campaign's over pacing? Now you're sort of delivering impressions a little bit more quickly than you had previously anticipated. Now, again, in the first situation, you're over pacing, but you are hitting your KPI goals. Okay, so that may be a sign that you check your IO and your line item budgets just to make sure that they're adjusted to spend more evenly. And the rest of it can kind of work towards your KPI goals. So it's a pacing issue. What if you're over pacing and you're not hitting your KPI goals? Well, there you'll definitely want to still adjust to spend more evenly at that IO or line item level, but then think about additional, more significant optimizations as well, going back to maybe a high-low criteria. Low performing sites or audiences, take them out of there and scale up against your higher performer. Now, in a way, this overpacing scenario that we're talking about here, there is a silver lining because you're delivering a lot of impressions, and hopefully you've got enough in the bank to be able to help you make those optimization decisions. And that may not be the case for the third and final scenario where you're underpacing. In the first instance here, you're underspent, but thankfully you are hitting your KPIs so far. That's great. So definitely adjust your pacing to fulfill more bids. And to help fulfill more bids, you may need to determine if you've got to loosen up some targeting restrictions. It could be an allow list that's too restrictive, for example. But be careful as you hopefully ramp up spending in the remaining days of the campaign that you're still focused on hitting those KPIs. You don't want to be so broad, for example, that you're pacing but not getting towards your goals. We're going to hit on some features inside DV360 later on that can help you troubleshoot this exact scenario. Now, last and definitely not least, you're underpacing and you're not hitting your KPIs. That's really the worst case scenario. And honestly, we'd recommend avoiding getting to this point at all by having those daily check-ins on pacing. Because if you find yourself in this unfortunate scenario, you're going to have to ramp up spending, but make recommendation decisions potentially on not enough impression thresholds, right? So that's a sort of a dicey place to be. Okay, so we went through those 3 scenarios, and now we're going to talk about the levers. So we talked a lot about this idea of high-low, right? So spending more, ramping up more against high performance areas and excluding or lowering bids against those low performing areas. So that's really going to be the framework with which we talk through these various levers that are at your disposal within DV360. But first, before we begin, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, always make sure you've got significant data in your campaigns before you start making particularly any sort of really granular optimization. So for example, don't exclude a site that seems to be underperforming against your KPIs, but it's only been live for a day or two. A good rule of thumb is that a minimum threshold for impressions is between 5,000 to 10,000 impressions. So of course, those more granular cuts of reporting, wait until maybe you've got a week's worth of data, right? So look back on that cadence chart that we went through to help you determine when might be appropriate to start pulling for those recommendations. Now, if you've met those sufficient data thresholds, you should then be able to analyze performance at that line item level. So analyzing for line item performance and then being able to make those budget allocations to improve your campaign outcomes. So what are those different cuts of data? Well, first is at that app or URL level, or simply where you're running impressions. Here you can pull a report in DV360 that identifies the environments that are performing very well or the environments where you're not really getting that conversion or KPI performance that you're seeking. With your top performers, you might even want to create a custom channel to corral those apps or those URLs in one place so you can target them as a separate line item with a higher bidding strategy. So similar notion there for number 4, but now take into the idea of inventory sources. You can also look at the high-low from an inventory source standpoint to see where you might want to ramp up or exclude. A different lens altogether is by looking at performance through audience performance. And you can find that information in DV360 through your audience performance report. And similarly, you want to move away from lower performing audience segments and increasing bids against your best performing audiences. Furthermore, you may choose to recommend expanding your reach against those best audiences by creating additional custom affinity audiences that are very similar. So this goes back to this idea that if you've got some broader line items within your campaign and you notice certain affinities that are popping up with which you're not actively targeting, well, create a few line items that do isolate where that performance is happening, and you may be able to improve your campaign outcomes that way. Yet another set of optimization levers include first browser type or OS, which stands for operating system. Here, you want to take some extra precaution that you're thinking through cross-device conversion or assisted conversions, right? So for example, you may find that even though off the bat, it looks like a mobile ad exposure has a lower conversion rate, but that ultimately the conversion you desire can only be completed on desktop. Don't discount that mobile ad exposure right away, because it could be assisting that user with more exposure before that user ultimately converts on desktop. So make sure that you're sort of accounting for assisted conversions when you're looking at reporting at this level. And then besides browsers and OS, you can also pull line item reporting at the region, city, or page categories level. Finally, our last two cuts of data, you can optimize based on time of day and creative size. The time of day reporting comes up actually in my past experience quite a bit when I worked on an entertainment account, theatrical specifically. And we were able, through pulling reporting just like this, to see that activity, that conversion activity that we wanted really ramps up between Wednesday and goes through strong to like Saturday mid-afternoon. It was that specific. So you may find those types of optimization learnings through reporting like this. And then with creative size, beyond excluding your lowest performer and throwing more bids against your highest performers, you can also think about size combinations that seem to work really well together. And if you're seeing those combinations in your reporting, you can actually put the sets of creatives that are performing really well for you in a separate line item, allowing for higher bidding against those killer combinations. Okay, so we went through a lot, and it does sound like a lot. And we know that sometimes you're asked for optimizations on the fly. You're on the phone with a client, and they're seeing that they need to improve some of these KPI outcomes, and they ask, what should we do? Well, DV360 has a couple of widgets and tools to help you with those optimization recommendations if you're severely time crunched. So if you're looking in the UI, we'll go through them sort of module by module. The first place that you can look at is your quick pacing and performance module. Just how's your pacing, how's your KPI performance, and start to sort of curate some recommendations from there. The next place you can look is something called the impression loss widget. This is a really quick and handy tool for those quick optimizations. This widget, think of it as a fail-safe. It surfaces line items that don't have any approved creative attached, for examples, or line items that have stopped spending because they've already hit a frequency cap that might have been set up at the start of a campaign. That's great. Those types of outliers or anomalies, if you will, can help you clean up your campaign really quickly. So again, that's the impression loss widget. And then over there on the right, you see there's a budget widget as well that allows you to estimate how much revenue, impressions, clicks, or conversions might change if you were to adjust something down at the line item level. So you may say, okay, we could maybe increase pacing, or maybe we drop out some of our lowest performing page categories, and then you can make those suggested changes here and be able to give your client a really quick sense of what that might do for your campaigns. If you have a little bit more time, use the optimization view in DV360 to drill into those specific line item performances that we just went through across the slides. So again, that's time of day, creative size, audience, inventory, and so on. That's if you've got a little bit more time to dig into the detail. And over time, you may come to prioritize certain cuts of reporting data that have the most meaningful contribution to your actionable analysis. And you'll slowly sort of get to a rhythm of what to sort of go to first to help you with those optimization recommendations. Finally, I want to touch on the idea of frequency. We talked sort of about using blunt instruments just as a way of illustration, so exclusion or inclusion and so on. But frequency capping is the process of just limiting the number of times an individual is exposed to a single ad or a campaign, and you can do that as well. So not wholesale exclusion or sort of just bidding wholesale higher against a total audience, but you could recommend slightly higher frequency for your most valuable audiences, and the converse is true as well. Okay, so I will be ending this section with a short example from Secession. Hopefully, there's some Secession fans out there. I'm a big one. Here we've got Greg, who needs to advise his wonderful colleague Tom on how to optimize the latest Waystar Royco media campaign. So he's in his closet office. Greg pulls up the following data on DV360. So he sees that there's 20 days left in the campaign. The campaign is pacing in full, which is great, but he's not quite hitting his KPI. He's getting a higher cost per acquisition. He's getting a $6 versus what he wants to target, which is a $5 cost per acquisition. And he is sure that Tom will be very angry if he sees that. So what should Greg do? We will take your suggestions in the chat box to the right-hand side of your screen. So go ahead and input them. And I'll give this about 20 seconds to get some of your suggestions. Okay, we've got a shy group, but that's all right because we can share some of the suggestions that we would make, but keep the comments coming because I know there's a little bit of a delay in what you put in the chat box and our video right now. We have some suggestions. First one is pulling a site list to identify underpacing properties. Yes, that's definitely something Greg should do. Creative performance is another great report to pull. Narrowing the audience targeting. Yeah, maybe we're just going after too big of a prospect, and that's why the costs are really high. We need a higher quality target audience. Change the auto bidding to conversions. Yeah, change the bid strategy, right? To make sure that the bidder knows what it's doing. That's great. Time of day reporting, browser operating system reporting, also fair game. Thank you so much for your suggestions. These are great. And hopefully we can get Greg out of trouble here. All right, now we're on to our next section and we're gonna bring Erica back.
Hi again. We first have a few questions from the chat that I'm going to quickly address. The first one was, what's the time range being used for the historical data pull in the forecasting tool? I'm not actually sure what that time range is, so I recommend you connect with your account managers to get a better sense of this. The second question was, can I include a general budget in that planning tool and have the platform suggest a budget by format? No, the tool isn't going to suggest formats explicitly, but you can experiment within the planning feature to figure out which formats will be the most efficient. It's pretty flexible, and I think as you explore it, you'll find that it won't take very long to get a sense of which format would make the most sense. So we encourage you to play around there. And then I think there was one more. is there a way to set campaign flight budgets instead of daily budgets? The answer is yes, and we will be covering that when we talk about auto budget allocation, and we'll show you that live in a demo as well. And now we'll be getting into some of the optimization tools in DV360. So the 5 that we'll be reviewing are optimization view, in-flight optimization suggestions, the intelligence panel, bid multipliers, and auto bidding and targeting expansion, all of which we will show via demos as well. So starting with the optimization view, this can be toggled to at the line item or IO level by changing the drop down kind of on that middle bar from the performance default to optimization, which unlocks in-flight suggestions that you're able to take action on or consider as you're in that optimization mode. We'll take a look at this in more detail in the demo, but with a very quick flip of a switch, you're able to unlock some pretty powerful optimization recommendations here, ranging from performance to budget adjustments. What's included in the optimization view overview? The slide before this just quickly goes over the types of things that you'll be able to break down. And it was designed to be extremely granular. So you're able to pivot everything from day of weeks that are performing well to different exchanges that you can consider optimizing towards or away from. But we really wanted this to give you an opportunity to easily identify areas to make quick tweaks to IOs and line items so that you aren't spending hours and hours doing manual reporting. At the IO level, so like I said, this exists at the IO and the line item level. What you're able to get at the IO level here is the following categories. So you can see campaigns that are underpacing, underperforming, underpacing, and underperforming, which, as Yvonne mentioned, hopefully we're avoiding outright by employing some of the great tools that you're learning through this session. You can see which campaigns or IOs are on track or inactive. So at the IO level, it's a little bit more high level, but the point here is to flag things that are requiring immediate attention and gives you an understanding into if something is underperforming, why, and what are some of the steps that you can take to get it back on track. At the line item level, things are a little bit more granular, and I think this is where things get really interesting because as we talked about in a few slides earlier, there are so many different ways that you can break out performance or ways that you can look to the DSP to recommend optimizations that are available. So you can do everything from look at things that are underpacing to get a sense of which types of sites you should be adding to an exclusion list, or where there are opportunities to be more efficient in hitting your KPIs. This is an overview of all of the different segmenting options that are available. It was broken down into 3 main categories as this tool was being designed. So we've got content views, which include things like creative size, environment, etc. We have audience views, which gives you a sense of where there are opportunities to tweak the users that you're going after. So whether that's increasing a frequency cap, optimizing towards a certain day of the week, looking at certain regions, there are a lot of different ways that you can lean on DV360 to get a better sense of where there are opportunities to improve. The last category is technology views, which is truly just device type, but still within this list, you have a really robust set of options to explore as you're looking to make campaign performance tweaks. And that segment by view is something that we'll again explore in the demo, but you can toggle to it just under the information widgets once you're in that optimization view. So once you get a feel for which of the 11 segment categories are the most useful to you, you'll get into a rhythm of toggling to those immediately. Sometimes you might say, okay, we've been doing a lot of day of week optimizations. Let's see if we can pull in URLs. That's something we haven't really optimized to yet. So lots of flexibility and ability for you to be kind of creative in leaning on the DSP to identify opportunities to optimize that you might not have otherwise thought of or would have taken you a long time to figure out through manual reporting. I think the most powerful set of tools are the in-flight optimization suggestions, though. So now that we've kind of taken a look at the different ways you can slice and dice performance at the IO and line item level, we're going to get into the 4 categories of optimization suggestions that allow you to lean on DV360 to recommend areas where you can shift budget, you can shift targeting, you can adjust bids, and tweak different settings. So, starting with budget reallocation suggestions, I think this is really super powerful. And I wish we had something like this available in my media coordinator days when we were doing lots of manual reporting to identify areas of budget shifts. But this basically gives you a sense of where you can shift budget between line items based on what's performing well so you can get the most efficient reach within this overall IO. Something to consider for all of these optimization suggestions is that these are truly just suggestions. So when you're looking at these are not things that DV360 will apply to your campaigns without you approving them. So this is a good way to maybe start your optimization process. If you don't want to make the exact changes that are being recommended here, you don't have to. If you want to, this is a really quick way to shift budget easily. But the point is, you still have full control within the DSP. There are no decisions being made on your behalf. They're just suggestions being surfaced to you in the hopes of saving you some time. Bid decrease suggestions are also really helpful. Again, we're trying to get the budget that you're putting in the DSP to go the absolute furthest that it can. So wherever there are opportunities that DV360 recognizes for the bids to be lowered based on what's happening in the auction environment, that will be surfaced to you in the bid decrease suggestions. Bid multiplier lowering suggestions is another way to stay as efficient as possible within the DSP. We'll get into what bid multipliers are in a little bit more detail, but once you have those set, this is another option that's available with that in-flight optimization suggestion view, and you'll get a sense for where you can start to tweak those once your media has been live for a few weeks. And then finally, we have targeting exclusion suggestions. So based on the campaign goals that you're setting at the IO level, the DSP will recognize, based on, say, cost per click, here are certain sites that you can add to an exclusion list, or here are certain genres of sites that aren't performing as well for your specific goals. So again, everything here is really geared towards helping you save time, helping you quickly identify opportunities to make quick and easy tweaks to make the most of your budget, make the most of the flight dates that you have in front of you, and be as successful as possible within DV360. Intelligence panel is the other great tool here. This is a little bit more high level than the optimization suggestions that we just ran through. If you are an active DV360 user, I'm sure you recognize this as one of the first things you see in the DSP. If we move on to the next slide, this little highlighted box shows you exactly what I'm talking about. You might be used to automatically just Xing out of that box and going straight into your campaign performance data and getting right into that optimization mode. But I do recommend taking a look at this. The point of this tool is to call out things that need to be brought to your attention immediately. So where there are campaign health alerts or optimization recommendations, you can navigate through this intelligence panel to expand what's being alerted so you can review, see details, and take action straight from that intelligence panel. So again, just a tool that's trying to get you to be as efficient with your time as possible, not take the guesswork out of some of the troubleshooting that might be happening once a campaign is live. And I just think it's a really helpful thing that you can kind of think about as your friend when you're working within DV360. So I think we have a trivia break next. So Yvonne, I'll pass it back over to you to facilitate trivia, and then we'll get into a demo.
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of a brain break. We're going to have 3 trivia questions here before our demos, and we'll go through them one by one. The first question is true or false. You should use a high frequency cap for broad prospecting targets?
Hey, Yvonne, I think given the delay we're seeing, I think we should probably just click through them on our end. So maybe we
Okay.
can do like a dramatic pause for 2 seconds to make it feel like it's exciting, but then we can share the answer for the group, if that sounds good.
Perfect. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, here's our dramatic pause. And the answer is false. For broad targets, don't have that high frequency cap because you want to make sure that you're delivering against that reach, right? And making sure you're opening up that funnel as wide as possible. Multiple choice question next. If your business outcome is to drive brand awareness, what's a good optimizable KPI? So all the way back to the beginning. So answers are potentially cost per acquisition, app installs, on target reach, or D, clicks. So brand awareness, what's the KPI we pair with? On target reach. Out of those four, that's the sort of mid funnel KPI that we can think about. Last question, multiple choice. What is an optimization lever that is considered a high priority or must do? Okay, so is it shift budgets to top performing lines? Is it make sure creatives are approved, pacing caps and pacing profile is in order, or all of the above? Trick question, all of the above. Everything there is something that should be looked at either on a daily or weekly basis. All right, now we are on to our demo.
Great, and I'm going to consolidate. We're going to look at optimization view at the line item level in DV360. I'm also going to show you where bid multipliers live while we're in the DSP, and then we'll jump back to some more content. So once you're in DV360, you click into your campaign and you go into an insertion order that you want to check out. So for the purpose of this, we're going to just take a look at the display one that I have set up. This is where you're going to be able to toggle to optimization. And if you want every time you log into DV360 optimization view to be the first thing you see, you can go ahead and pin that. So you don't have to be manually updating that every single time you log in. And once you do that, you'll be able to unlock the different ways that you can segment. So right now we're at the IO level. It's the same exact process once you're at the line item level. Let me get back out here. So here's your display IO. Then you can click into your test line item. This is all of the different types of targeting that I have applied to this line item. And the same process will apply when you're looking at all of your insertion orders to toggle to that optimization view. So again, a really fun tool that we recommend experimenting with. And then once you're in the line item details, you toggle to bid multipliers, where this is where you're able to play around with the different types of weight that if you want to apply more weight to, say, a certain time of day, or you know that within this line item, there's a certain type of device type that you want to bid a little bit higher on, you just go in and select new multiplier, device type, or whatever it is that you want to be multiplying your bids for. And then once this loads, we've got a little bit of a lag, you're able to select the exact device types that you're looking to bid higher on. So these happen on a scale from 1 to 10. So you can be pretty flexible in how you're weighting these. And once you've set a bid multiplier, you're by no means locked into that for the rest of your campaign. You can continue to make optimizations to this. But this is something that I highly encourage playing around with. This was designed so that you didn't have to be breaking out new line items every time you wanted to add a little bit more budget or go after a certain type of audience segment or device type or time of day. This can all live within the same line items now. So that's an overview of how to toggle to optimization view and where bid multipliers live. Now we're going to hop back to the presentation, talk a little bit more about bid multipliers, and then get into automated bidding. So I'm kind of going to breeze through this because I just mentioned this at a high level in the demo, but bid multipliers are something that allow you to automatically decrease or increase the bid of a line item. So as you're in that optimization mode and you're thinking about what's performing well, what's not, this is something that allows you to just tweak the weight of certain features like apps and URL, audience list, demographics, geography, date and time, and device types. So really helpful tool. I highly recommend taking advantage of this. It's a great way to be as efficient as possible within the DSP without having to break out more line items. A quick example of something that you might use here or why you might use bid multipliers. I'm just going to speak to one of the use cases we have up here. Say you've determined that desktop is way outperforming mobile. You could use the multipliers within that line item to increase your bid on desktop to favor that environment without having to create that additional line item. Some things to call out. You have to be using fixed bidding if you want to use bid multipliers. The value is set between 0.10 and 10. So again, you can be really flexible with how you're weighting these. You aren't able to multiply a combination of audience lists. So if you wanted to bid up on one specific list, it would only have to be that one. And at the moment, we can't do this on TrueView. So this is only available for open auction display and video. Cool, we've talked about how to implement them. We included the demo for this section alongside optimization view. So we're going to get right into auto bidding, which is one of my personal favorite features of DV360. And we all know that the whole point of using DV360 and the whole point of using programmatic buying in general is to reach the right audience at the right moment with the right message. How many of us have repeated that to our family members when trying to explain our jobs to them? But the point of auto bidding is to add on one more layer of that, which is doing all of those things, but reaching those users at the most optimal price possible. So while DV360 is doing its thing and we're in the auction environment, DV360 is making bidding decisions across billions of users a day, which enables us to build a pretty decent level of intelligence on what's happening in those auction environments. So you have all of this intelligence right at your fingertips, which is great. And what auto bidding basically does is informs what different impressions should be bid on and what different impressions are worth based on the targeting criteria that you've put in the DSP. So some impressions might be worth the CPM that you've put in. Say you have certain audiences that, they might be worth that 850 CPM that you've already entered. But in other cases, as we move on, there are opportunities to be more efficient with what you're bidding as well. And this is what auto bidding really allows you to do, is lean on the DSP to use the intelligence that's being gathered from those auction environments to bid lower when possible. And the kind of main features or the main causes that went into building this auto bidding functionality, which has been around for a while now, is to minimize ad ops time. So giving you time back and taking some of the heavy lifting off of your plate as you're in the process of making your campaigns as efficient as possible. This also allows for budget fluidity. So when you enable auto bidding, you give the DSP a little bit more flexibility to spend higher where necessary, but spend lower where possible, and basically put money back in your hands to use in more efficient ways on the rest of your campaign. And this was also really geared towards consolidation and improving serviceability of the tools. So giving you the opportunity to lean on DV360 a little bit more in that planning mode. The next slide, we're not going to go through each one of these in detail. The point of this is to highlight that we have an auto bidding algorithm, basically for every single part of the marketing funnel. So whether you're doing a more reach-based campaign, just optimizing towards clicks, or your super low funnel going for a conversion on site, we've got an algorithm to fit your needs. This is just a more helpful overview of where exactly everything sits on the funnel. But again, the algorithms available to you are hopefully we've got something for you based on whatever type of campaign you're running. Two quick things to note on auto bidding. We've got two options when you're setting this up. So you can inform the algorithms in two different ways. You can favor spend and maximize performance, which is highlighted on this slide. So you're basically informing the tech that it's most important that we spend our budget in full. Whereas on the next slide, you also have the ability to say, you know what, we know we're going to use this budget eventually, but right now the most important thing is being as efficient as possible and reaching our KPIs. So we want the tech to favor being the most efficient and getting the most affordable KPIs as possible. And we have a little bit more flexibility in the time frame that we're spending that budget. So definitely work with your account managers to decide which solution makes the most sense for you. There are some other call outs that they might bring to your attention when setting this up, but it's a really powerful set of tools that you have at your fingertips. And I encourage everyone who's using DV360 to be taking advantage of auto bidding in some way. We also have custom bidding, which is available. I'm not going to get into this in a ton of detail today. This is a little bit more technical and requires collaboration with your technical teams. So if this is something that's interesting to you, definitely reach out to your account managers. But we're going to skip through the next few slides to get us wrapped up here. Cool. Outcome-based buying, same thing. Talk to your account managers if it's of interest. Just to recap the auto bidding features and why this is so valuable to you, it removes the need to adjust line item budgets individually. It helps boost campaign performance and take some time off of your hands, and hopefully gives you time back to be more efficient in other areas of your DV360 experience. I will pass it back over to Yvonne to get into some of the more technical details here. And yeah, take it away, Yvonne.
All right. I promised you at the beginning that we're going to get into a little bit of what that secret sauce is, right? We've talked about automated bidding, bid multipliers, all of these great tools that surface suggestions for you. But you're probably thinking, how do I know that it really works? So we know that as a DSP, that real-time bidding in DV360 is its bread and butter, right? It's setting a ton of millions and millions of bids for every impression auction. And it's learning every time it's out in that auction based on the propensity factors that may drive a certain action. And what that procedure is that I just described, right? Making an action, learning, making another action and learning, that iterative nature is really machine learning in its simplest form, right? And it's been long a mechanism inside DV360 to help us all enhance our digital advertising. And it plays that critical role in some of those really great features that we went through, like automated bidding. And what I think is really key here on the slide is that it's learning from a lot of different signals. It's not just one dimensional. And it's also learning in a way that fits today's modern digital marketing. So looking across different devices to get you really that precise suggestion at scale. And so I had just kind of briefly touched on what machine learning in its simplest form looks sort of feels like. This is a breakdown in 4 steps in what actually occurs in the DV360 bidder, starting with making a prediction. And then the bidder is able to enhance that prediction based on past machine learning to maximize the likelihood of getting you that positive outcome. And then it makes us another calculation based on what's actually happening in the bid marketplace, what other advertisers, how they're bidding, their highs and lows, and makes that adjustment to protect your investment. And then the bid is made. But then, of course, that process starts over again because all of those learnings get fed back into the algorithms so that it's learning and retraining the models over time. So I mentioned 2 slides ago, 40 different signals that DV360 uses to feed its algorithms. What are those 40 different signals? Well, these are just a few of the signals. And you can see that they fall under audience, content, creative, and technology. I'll just highlight here that DV360 is also investing in first-party data on the audience pillar. You can see that first-party data is going to be a very important signal to come, as you can imagine, helping privacy-focused marketers do more with their own data so that the machine learning, the optimizations, the bidding suggestions are informed by your specific customer data. All right, I'm going to flip through this case study and sort of leave it with you when Stephen and the Learn with GMP team is able to send these materials. But there will be a case study in the deck for you to look at. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is this may be a new concept for a lot of our teams here, this idea of leaving DV360 to sort of lead us in terms of things like automated bidding. If that describes you and where your team is at, and you are willing to maybe test the waters and see what automated bidding can do next to some of the kind of standard or more manual types of bidding that you're doing today, we're recommending an A/B test framework that, again, we'll leave with you that you can reference. And you can see some of the best practices here in how to set up that A/B test and some watch outs as well. But the idea here is setting up this test can help you get more comfortable and potentially seeing if automated bidding is a solution for you and starting to transition some of your line items to allow for the algorithmic driven bid strategies to take place. Finally, we're going to introduce just one last feature to you, which is called the DV360 targeting expansion. So we talked a lot about machine learning and DV360 being able to feed on 40 different signals for millions and millions and millions of impression calls that it's made in its history. So all of that kind of goodness, all of that science feeds targeting expansion as well. By relying on those signals, it can help you expand your target audiences and your target audience reach by suggesting other users that have similar characteristics or share the same propensity as the audiences that you may be going after in your campaign. And we're seeing a lot of advertisers that leverage this strategy be able to drive tangible outcomes. For example, 20% more conversions at the same average return on investment versus their manual audience bidding strategies. And targeting expansion, just like automated bidding, as Erica has described, is really meant to save time and resource for you, being able to help you drive that reach, drive the conversion KPIs, for example, without having to do a ton of audience research and audience work. You will also, at the end of the day, have the controls. It will suggest those audiences, but ultimately, whether or not you determine that's right for your campaign is up to you. And DV360 will also surface those reach estimates so you get an idea of what it can do for your campaign before you press a button. And last but not least, just want to point out that targeting expansion also works in that in our ever-changing ads ecosystem, helping you get to those modeled similar audiences without need for cookies. And again, I'll leave this with you here as just an explanation of how it works. And then finally, if you're interested in giving this a spin, this is how you would be able to navigate to it inside the DV360 UI. And that's it. And hopefully over time, you're able to take some of these new features for a spin and get to those optimal settings for your campaigns and for your clients. What I would also suggest, we talked about an A/B test to sort of get your feet wet, but You'll always want to pull those performance reports at the end of any of your testing or sort of transitions to new strategies. And just to ensure that you're frequently checking in as you're evolving the way you set up your campaigns in DV360 to always ensure you're hitting those performance results and those performance targets that you set out. And we've got a last demo here.
Awesome. And I know we're at time, so we're going to end with talking about 3 features that we kind of just discussed. So we're going to talk about where you apply auto budget allocation, where you apply auto bidding, and how to navigate to the targeting expansion tool. So once you're in your campaign, if you wanted to enable auto budget allocation, it's a really straightforward process at the IO level. Once this loads, we'll click into a campaign and get you in there. Just give us 1 second. So you go into your display test IO, you go into IO details, and from here, you scroll down to optimization and you select automate bid and budget at insertion order level. So this gives the DSP the green light to allocate budget across the different line items that live under this IO based on the performance it's seeing. Here, you can decide you can inform the tech which performance you want to be optimizing to, conversions or clicks, or maximum viewable impressions. So you have some flexibility in what you're deciding here. Once you're in the line item level, though, this is where you can select auto bidding to be applied. So you just scroll down to budget and pacing. Under budget and pacing, you have bid strategy, and you select automated bidding, where you can, again, optimize towards conversions, clicks, impressions, or a custom algorithm if that's something that you've worked with your DV360 account manager to set up. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is targeting expansion. So once you are in your line item level details, you go to apply audience lists. You can add any sort of list that you want. For the purpose of this demo, we're going to just look at a Google audience, click apply, and then once you're in here, that targeting expansion toggle is enabled, where you can say we want the most expansion possible, or we want just a little bit of expansion. So now you know how to navigate to auto budget allocation, auto bidding, and targeting expansion. That wraps the content that we have for you today. I know we're a few minutes over, so thank you for sticking with us. And I hope that you can take some of the knowledge that you've gained here and start to use DV360 in even more powerful ways. So thank you all for your attention, and we hope you have a good one.
So we are going to cap off this call with a very quick trivia. I'm going to go through a checklist that you can sort of have as a leave behind when you get the presentation, and then we'll take some questions. But let's get into the trivia very quickly. So true or false, you can use the planning workspace to forecast against YouTube inventory. This is inside DV360. So true or false? It's true. This is something that you can do across YouTube inventory as well. Second question, true or false? If you're using bid multipliers, you can also use algorithmic bidding. A lot of buzzwords here. False, false. One at a time. And then multiple choice here. The following are optimization tools inside DV360. You've got optimization lens, bid multipliers, automated bidding, or all of the above. Hopefully they all sound familiar because they are all tools and features inside. All right, so as promised, I want to leave everybody with troubleshooting tips. And we know that even if you've set everything up right, you're optimizing on a regular basis, still things may not work out perfectly. So what we have are 9 different top ad spend blockers that if you arrive at this situation, you can go through one at a time as a checklist, and hopefully that will help you troubleshoot and unblock and get your campaign spending again. I'll go through a couple of examples. One very common deal blocker is that you've been outbid. You're check to make sure that you're not bidding much lower than floor, for example, to make sure you're starting to win those bids. Here are some other examples. You may be targeting in a video inventory, but your creative has a VAS tag, but your inventory sources that your campaign is running on is mostly VPaid, right? So make sure that what you're delivering in terms of creative is matching what your inventory requirements are. Other deal spend blockers, landing page mapping. It's less frequent, but maybe a landing page on your client site has a pixel call that a publisher does not like, and DV360 won't drive there. So as you can see, those 9 different deal blockers can become a checklist for you in case you're feeling stuck. If you're feeling very stuck, we, of course, have support for you and sort of contact our help center. And that is available inside the UI. And this is the navigation path that you can take to reach support. You can either use the chat or email feature to enlist help. And just so you know, once you get to that and you sort of call up an email or a chat thread, you'll be assigned a case ID. And that case ID you can share with your DV360 account manager, and that person can help you escalate internally as well. Just want to make sure that you've got those tips and tricks. And that wraps things up for us. Any questions for those that are sticking around, we'll be happy to answer. So let us know.
Yvonne, I think we're all squared away on questions. First and foremost, thank you to you for an amazing presentation and all the work that went into making this happen. If you actually want to pop to the next slide, I can do a quick wrap up and we can get everyone on with their day. So first and foremost, I know we ran a little bit over today. That's because we had a lot of great content to cover. So glad everyone stuck around and made it through the awesome session today. I did drop our feedback form in the YouTube chat window. Please do, if you have 2 minutes, take the time to fill it out. It really provides us with a ton of great feedback that our team can quickly act on. And also, if you want to throw our 2 amazing facilitators a compliment, they would love to hear from you too. So with that, this will take us to the end of our session today. I do want to thank our 2 amazing facilitators again, Yvonne and Erica, for all the prep and all the work that went into making this happen. And then I can't forget our amazing production team who's behind the scenes, who makes all of this happen as well. So we couldn't do it without them. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great rest of your Wednesday and look for that follow-up email with the recording and deck by most likely end of this week. Take care, everyone. See you soon.